Hello, everybody, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Dani, and today Great.com talks with Alisa Gonzalez, education specialist at Women in Distress of Broward County. If you haven't heard of it yet, Women in Distress mission is to stop domestic violence abuse for everyone through intervention, education, and advocacy. Before we begin, remember, if you're new here in this podcast, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast. Hi, Alisa, and welcome.
Hi, Dani. Thank you so much for having me.
It's truly our pleasure. And I got to say, I love your energy. I don't know. We didn't chat so much before, but I really felt this calm in you when it's really soothing, I've got to say. Tell me about your story. How did you begin working in Women in Stress?
Okay, so I'm actually a social work student currently obtaining my master's. And when I was in my undergrad, I interned at the state attorney's office in my area. And what I did there was I was in the victim advocate unit, and I would help serve domestic violence survivors and victims and help them through their process in court and get them resources and things like that. And one of the agencies that we referred our victims out to was Women in Distress. We used to meet on these calls where we meet with the coalition that surrounds domestic violence awareness in our area. And through those calls, I was able to make a Emily. And after kind of networking and just learning more from her and keeping in contact with her throughout that time, I did a little bit of a tabling event with one of her staff members while I was still in the program doing my internship. And then once I was coming to the end of my program, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I really need a job, because after that internship, I had to then find a job. And I applied here at Women in Distress, and I got the position as education specialist.
Oh, that's so nice. And thank you for bringing this moment in your life that you said, oh my God, I need to get a job. I feel like so many of us face this.
Absolutely.
It's a common moment. Let's talk just a bit about the context. First, just locate the Broward County for us. It's in Florida, right? Where exactly in Florida is it located?
We're in South Florida. So if you were to put it on a map, it's the best way. When someone says Florida, they think two places. They think Miami and they think Orlando because of Disney, and Miami's Miami. We're a little bit north of Miami, and maybe about an hour away from Miami. This is where the area is that we're located.
All right, good. And what is the situation that you guys have been seeing there, considering domestic abuse? I believe that the whole world suffered with an increase in the numbers of people suffering from domestic abuse during the pandemic, people confined in their homes. How is the situation right now in this region?
Yeah, I would say in general, domestic violence is a major issue that it impacts people worldwide. We see that 1 in 3 women experience intimate partner violence worldwide, 1 in 4 women in the US. And then in specifically Florida, 34.2% of Florida women experience domestic violence. The statistics for men are a little bit different, but they're also there. 1 in 10 men experience domestic violence in the US, and 24.6 Florida men experience domestic violence. So we see that it's an issue that it impacts anyone. And it's a prominent issue that we see. I mean, we see it because I feel like the issue is its prominence, but not everyone understands like the severity of it until it gets into like a physical aspect. And it's really important to understand that domestic violence and intimate partner violence is not just about the physical aspect. There's so much more that goes into it. There's mental, there's verbal, emotional abuse, all of those things, financial abuse. And so sometimes we don't even realize what's happening because we're only focusing on the physical aspect of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you mind expanding on that a little bit? Because I feel like we don't talk about these other types of abuse very often. So you mentioned a few categories, but which toxic behaviors, I believe, would actually be forms of abuse in this greater scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are many forms of abuse. When we talk about domestic violence specifically, if we're looking at the statute in our area in Florida, it really only covers, like by law, it really only covers the physical aspect. But when we actually dive into the issue and we talk about what domestic violence is, what makes up with, like what it is made up of, and all of those things, we know and understand that domestic violence is all about power and control. So when we teach people about domestic violence, we use the power and control wheel. I can provide that to you just so you can see it as well, but which essentially is in the middle, there's the word power and control, and outside it are all of the things that people do to maintain and gain power and control over the people that they are abusing. So some of those things could be using intimidation, using emotional abuse. So that could be constantly putting someone down, calling someone names, making them feel like questioning their reality and gaslighting them, things like that, using isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming based off of what is, what is happening. They could be saying things like, oh, that wasn't a big deal, or you're overreacting, stuff like that. Using privilege or using children. And then the last two would be economic abuse and using coercion or threats.
Oh, it's really very broad, and it's a shame that by law only the physical moment gets into recognition, right? And I'm going to refer briefly to the mission that I said before, that is stop domestic violence abuse for everyone through intervention, education, and advocacy. I very much relate to the last two ones, education and advocacy. I do believe they are the path to effective change. But let's understand what services does Women in Distress offer overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So here at our agency, we actually offer an array of services. We have a 24-hour crisis hotline for this that the state of Florida can use. We have outreach services, things like therapy, other supportive measures for people who are coming in for services. We have our education and prevention team, which is where I work. We really work to go into the community, and we go into schools, and we do a high school and middle school program with students to help hopefully prevent some of these things and really get those conversations out there. We go into professional spaces and teach professionals, whether that's law enforcement or other agencies in the community, or anyone who wants this information is welcome to get it. We go out and do presentations, tablings, things like that. We also have a residential shelter that we are able to, it's an emergency shelter for people who are experiencing abuse and need somewhere to stay. We have a pet shelter because a lot of the times people, when they are leaving abusive situations, it might be harder for them to leave if they cannot bring their pets with them. And then the last thing is we have economic empowerment services, where we help people who are experiencing abuse and are coming here to learn how to apply for jobs, create a resume. We help them with preparing for job interviews, things like learning how to cook on a budget, different things like that, for some people we might not think about all the time, but for people who have been isolated and have been abused, that's something they have to think about a lot.
And I'm very happy to see that you really try to cover all the aspects of it. I love when you talked about pets, because that's true. And, it's really hard to detach from this life of abuse, right? Especially when you don't have the chance to bring something that is so dear and might have been a point of comfort to you. So it could be complicated. And again, it's so much true that when you leave the situations, you really have to rebuild yourself from zero. So it's super necessary. But let's talk a little bit more about the educational actions that you were talking, like education and prevention, because I believe this is a tough conversation to have. It's not easy when you go to a high school, as you mentioned, to just bring the teens into this conversation. How does all that happen? What are your strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have two programs. We have one called Imagine a World Where Love Doesn't Hurt. That is, I mean, it's Imagine for short, but that's the full name. That is our middle school program. It's 8 sessions, and we go in and we do different presentations talking about different topics. So we start with things like what are healthy relationships, what are the signs of abuse, consent and boundaries, things like that. We also do interactive activities with the students. My two colleagues are the ones who handle that. And then myself and one of my other colleagues, we go into high school and we do a program called BOLD, which stands for Building Opportunities to Love with Dignity. I love the name. I'm a little biased, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I love the name too. So go for it.
So with the high school program, it's 5 sessions and it's pretty much a similar thing. We do a little information on unhealthy relationships and abusive relationships, on healthy relationships, and kind of giving them the tools. We do some information on sexual violence and its connection with domestic violence. We do interactive activities. And then our last session is how to help a friend and giving them the resources that they need to be able to carry this information to other people. Because when we look at the issue of teen dating violence, for example, only 33% of teens will tell someone if they are experiencing this, and the person that they are going to go to first is a friend or a peer. And so it's important for us, if we want to see this issue change, getting it from, from the foundational level of when people are learning about relationships, when students are interacting with their peers, and this is like a primal time for them to learn about relationships, giving them the tools to create those relationships on a healthy foundation. And so sometimes we have students in the room who exhibit those toxic, abusive behaviors, and they're able to recognize them in themselves and hopefully change those things. We have other students who have experienced it already, which is really surprising. Sometimes we'll have middle school or high school students who have said, this has already happened to me. I've already experienced this. And so giving them the tools to heal, and also to, moving forward, to see the signs and the red flags, so it hopefully doesn't happen again. And then for students who, this is brand new to them, at least they're having a foundation of that information that they can have for themselves and share with the people that they love.
That's truly incredible. I'm really happy to hear that this conversation is being conducted. They're having more space for the teens to have a chance to learn the tools to change that situation. And one thing that I'm thinking right now is for anyone that might be listening to this, or know someone that might be in this situation, how can they get in touch with you to get help? What is the best way to do that? It's through the website.
So if they want information on our agency, you can go to womenindistress.org. But we have a national hotline that anyone can use. It's our National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is 800-799-7233. That would be what I would recommend, is if someone is experiencing this and they need someone to talk to see what those next steps are, wherever you are, nationally. I believe this is for the United States, but that's the number that they would call. I can find an international hotline and see if there's also that resource that people who are maybe not listening, who are from the United States, can also use.
Well, thank you. If you can, we're really happy to share that information on our website as well. I think there's always people there that need help just to know how to get them, right? But in this conversation, we mentioned like abuse against women, and then have sexual abuse, and all of those things that you mentioned before. But this is a situation that also happens with elderly people a lot, I believe, right? Do you have any program or any effort directed to this community that might be suffering as well?
I personally have gone to places and done presentations about elder abuse. So we do offer presentations and, resources able to talk to people who directly work with the elderly or want to know more about that. We do have presentations and things like that. When we say we serve anyone, anyone can come here. No matter how you identify, how old you are, where you are in life, we are, our services are open to absolutely anyone. And I would say our focus is just like the general overview of domestic violence, but we do go into topics like child abuse, elder abuse, teen dating violence, so how it affects teenagers, intimate partner violence. We go into all of those different topics because they're so intersected. Sexual violence, even issues like gun violence. We see, people who have access to a weapon are, at increased risk when they're in a domestic violence situation, things like that. So there are so many issues that really overlap and intersect when it comes to the issue of domestic violence. And I think that's why it's so important to talk about and so important to understand, because really everything is kind of connected to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And with all that incredible work that you've been doing, I gotta ask, what is next for you personally, Elisa, and for your educational programs?
So right now I'm currently obtaining my master's in social work. And once I finish that, my goal is to continue on this sort of route. I really want to work with victims of domestic violence and gun violence. Those are two issues that hit really close to home for me and also just are very important to me. And like I said before, they intersect a lot. So I want to actually become a victim specialist or victim advocate. I also want to be a professor at some point, maybe like once I'm established with my career, because I think the educational aspect is so important. But right now, this is where I believe I'm going to gain the most knowledge to be able to, go into that pathway when I'm finished with school.
Wow, that's great. I do hope you get there.
Thank you.
Well, and please keep in touch. Would like to see your career evolving. And now, I gotta ask one thing, that is, with all of this going on, how is the Women in Distress funded?
So we have various grants that fund us. We have, donations. We actually have a thrift store in local to our area, probably about 10 minutes from where we're at. Like the administrative buildings are. And there people can come and donate, and anyone who comes to our shelter gets vouchers to use there. And people who shop there, like the general public, general community, anytime that they, buy something there, those funds go towards our emergency shelter. So that's one way that we fund that. But I would say mostly through grants, donations. We get a lot of support from our community, which is really amazing. And we just love to see, how much people really care about this issue and how much people are really willing to pour into our services and our agency, because it's only been able to help us maximize how many people we can help and be able to like expand our reach, because it's really hard to do work in general if you don't have, that support from the community, or you don't have, the necessary funds to make sure that everything is afloat and things like that.
Got it. And talking about this community involvement, what are the best ways to either get involved, maybe help with volunteering or donating? What are the best ways to help you keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually on our website have a tab that says what you can do. There are different things like volunteering, where you can, send an email to that volunteer email that's listed, and you can inquire about volunteering. During the holidays, we usually have different drives, like food drives. We have a toy drive during December, things like that. There are opportunities to host events and support donation drives. There are many different ways to donate. So a few of them are listed here on the website. So like we have a children's fund. We have a few funds that are listed. We have where you can donate to the thrift store, things like that. And just in general, we accept any donations that people are willing to give.
That's great. And for everyone watching us today, do go to their website, womenindistress.org, and get in touch with them to help out any way you can to know more about what they're doing. Their website is pretty good, I've got to say, and it's pretty intuitive. So you can get a lot of information in there, especially if you need help. Thank you so much for talking with us today, Alyssa. That was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And just to add one more thing, the month of October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so there are always lots of conversations happening, but the conversations cannot just be during that month. It needs to continue and happen all the time. And I just really thank you for the opportunity to come onto your platform and share a little bit about this issue that I think everyone needs to be aware of and everyone needs to understand.
I absolutely agree with you. So it's truly, truly a pleasure for me to talk to you.
Thank you.
And for everybody listening also, thank you so much for staying here with us one more time. And remember, if you enjoyed the episode, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because that shows the algorithm that this is an important conversation and more people can learn about the importance of the woman in distress of Broward County. Please stay with us for the next episode and get in touch with them. Maybe you can help. All right. Bye and see you.